The sunlight filtered through the leaves of an old maple tree, casting whimsical shadows on the cobblestone path that led to the charming two-story house. Amber Fitzpatrick couldn't contain her smile as she gazed at the manicured garden and the beautiful facade painted a warm peach color. She had always dreamed of a house like this, cozy, spacious, with large windows and a porch where she could drink coffee in the mornings and watch the sunset in the evenings. The road to that dream had been long and difficult. Amber grew up in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, in a family where every penny counted. From a young age, she realized that she would have to work hard to achieve her goals. After graduating from high school with honors, Amber received a scholarship to study marketing and business at a prestigious university. During the day, she devoured the knowledge of science. And in the evenings, she worked part-time as a waitress in a nearby cafe. There, she met Ethan Donovan, a charismatic and ambitious law student. Their romantic story unfolded quickly: dates in the park, long conversations over coffee, plans for their future together. A year after graduating from university, they got married, convinced that together they could conquer the world. The following years were filled with hard work and small victories. Amber landed a job at a promising marketing firm, quickly demonstrating her talent and creativity. Ethan chose the path of corporate lawyer, helping large companies navigate complex legal situations. Despite their busy schedules, they tried to find time for each other, dreaming of a home of their own and a happy family life. And now, 8 years after their wedding, their dream had finally come true. They had chosen this house together, imagining how they would spend weekends here, how they would invite their friends to barbecues, and how they would raise their children. Amber impatiently took the keys from her bag, eagerly awaiting the moment she could enter her new home. With a click of the lock, she found herself in the spacious and sunny living room. She was eager to start choosing furniture and decor to turn the house into a real family nest. Amber's thoughts were interrupted by the ring of her cell phone. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. With a smile, she pressed the answer button, ready to share her joy with her husband. "Honey, you're not going to believe this. I'm standing right in the middle of our living room. The house is even better than we imagined. I'm already picturing how we're going to." But Ethan didn't let her finish. With a cold and distant voice, as if he were speaking to a stranger, he uttered a sentence that instantly shattered all her dreams. "Amber, I'm going to file for divorce. And we're going to divide the assets, including this house. My lawyer will contact you to discuss the details." The phone went silent, and Amber stood in the middle of the living room, staring in disbelief at the phone in her hand. Their dreams together, their plans for the future, everything was collapsing overnight. She felt a lump forming in her throat and tears welling up in her eyes. But deep down, Amber knew that she wouldn't give up without a fight. This house was her dream, her reward for years of hard work and hardship. And she wouldn't let Ethan take away so easily what was rightfully hers. The determination to fight for her rights gradually overcame the pain and despair. Amber took a deep breath and shook off the stupor. A tough battle awaited her, but she was ready to fight. After all, she had always been able to overcome challenges and get her way. And this time would be no exception. Amber was sitting on a bench in the city park, mindlessly watching the children playing on the playground. Their carefree laughter and joyful shouts only amplified the pain and confusion that plagued her soul. Just a few hours ago, Amber's world had been turned upside down. And now she was desperately trying to piece together the fragments of her shattered reality. Ethan's decision to file for divorce had completely surprised her. Things hadn't always been smooth sailing in their relationship. But Amber never imagined that they would reach this point. She mentally reviewed the events of the past few years, trying to find answers to the questions that tormented her. Her story with Ethan had started so romantically, young lovers full of hope and ambition. They seemed like the perfect couple. The first years of their marriage were filled with happiness and understanding. They supported each other in their careers, shared joys and sorrows, and made plans for the future. But over time, something began to change. Ethan stayed later and later at work on important matters and meetings with clients. When he was at home, he was always sitting in front of his laptop, immersed in endless correspondence and studying documents. Amber tried to be a supportive wife, believing that all this was a temporary difficulty on the road to their common dream. Gradually, their conversations became increasingly rare and superficial. At some point, the long, intimate conversations over a glass of wine, filled with laughter and tenderness, disappeared. Now their communication was reduced to short sentences about everyday trivialities and weekend plans that mostly went unfulfilled. Amber couldn't help but notice the change in Ethan's appearance. He began paying more attention to his wardrobe, choosing suits and accessories from expensive designers. His once warm smile was replaced by a smug smirk, and his eyes had a steely glint, a reflection of his unbridled ambition. However, Amber continued to believe in their love and hope for the best. She blamed the changes in Ethan on stress and fatigue. She convinced herself that they could overcome any difficulty once they reached their goals. The purchase of a house had seemed to her a symbol of a new chapter in their relationship, an opportunity to start again. But now those hopes lay in ruins. Ethan's cold, lifeless voice on the phone still echoed in Amber's ears, tearing her apart. Was he trying to get half the value of their new house in the divorce? Or did he have another woman for whom he was willing to sacrifice their marriage? Or perhaps it was about his professional ambitions, and married life had become an obstacle on his path to success. Amber felt that the bitter resentment and frustration were slowly giving way to determination. She couldn't allow Ethan to ruin her dreams and plans like this. If he thought he could take away her house and leave her with nothing, he was very mistaken. Getting up from the bench, Amber headed towards the exit of the park. Her steps were firm and confident, and in her eyes burned the fire of unbreakable determination. She knew it was going to be a difficult journey, but she had no intention of backing down. After all, she was a strong, independent woman capable of defending her interests. The first thing she had to do was talk to Olivia, her best friend. Not only was she a brilliant lawyer, but she was also a very insightful person. She could find out Ethan's motives and find a way to protect Amber's rights in court. She took out her phone and dialed a familiar number. After a couple of rings, Olivia's cheerful voice sounded. "Hello, darling. How's the happy owner of the new house doing?" Amber swallowed the lump in her throat and tried to keep her voice steady. "Olivia, I need your help. Ethan has filed for divorce and wants to take the house from me. I don't know what to do." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. And then Olivia said firmly, "Don't worry, honey. We'll sort everything out. And we won't let that bastard ruin your life. Come to my office, and we'll discuss the details together. We can face any difficulty." Amber felt tears welling up in her eyes, this time not from despair but from gratitude and relief. She knew that with Olivia's support, she could overcome any challenge and stand up for herself. And the first step on that path would be to unmask Ethan's true motives. With renewed hope in her heart, Amber headed to Olivia's office, ready to start the fight for her happy future in the house of her dreams. Amber stopped in front of the tall glass and concrete building that housed Olivia Johnson's office. She had been here many times before, but today her visit had a completely different meaning. Taking a deep breath, Amber entered the spacious lobby and headed for the elevators. Once on the 12th floor, she confidently entered the reception area of Johnson and Associates. The receptionist greeted her with a friendly smile and, without waiting for a question, said, "Miss Johnson is expecting you. Mrs. Fitzpatrick. Please. Go ahead. Her office is at the end of the hall." Amber thanked the secretary And after walking the short distance, she knocked on the office door. From inside, a confident "Come in" was heard. She opened the door and entered the spacious room. Olivia was sitting at a huge oak desk, studying some papers. When she saw Amber, she put the papers aside and stood up, opening her arms cordially. "Amber, darling, what a joy to see you. Although the occasion to meet you is not the most pleasant." Amber hugged her friend tightly, feeling the tension of the last few hours gradually dissipating. She always felt safe with Olivia. She knew she could count on her support and her wise advice. Their friendship had begun during their university years when they had shared a dormitory. As students from different faculties, Olivia was studying law, and Amber was learning the fundamentals of marketing. They soon found a common language and became practically inseparable. Together, they prepared for exams, shared secrets and dreams, and supported each other in difficult times. After graduating, their paths briefly diverged. Olivia threw herself into building a career, and Amber focused on family life with Ethan. But despite their scarce meetings, they never lost touch and always knew they could rely on each other. And now, in one of the most difficult moments of her life, Amber needed Olivia's support and professionalism more than ever. Straightening her shoulders, she sat down in front of her friend and looked directly into her attentive brown eyes. "Olivia, I need your help. Ethan has asked for a divorce and wants to sue me for half of our new house. I can't let him ruin everything I've worked so hard to build." Olivia nodded gravely, her gaze focused and intense. "I'll do everything I can to protect your interests, Amber. But first, I need to know more details. Tell me exactly what happened and how your relationship with Ethan has evolved lately." And Amber began her story. She talked about years of hard work and dreams of owning her own house, how she and Ethan chose and bought the property. She spoke of the gradual cooling of their relationship, the mysterious changes in her husband's behavior, frustrated hopes, and bitter disappointments. Olivia listened in silence, only occasionally asking clarifying questions and taking notes in her notebook. When Amber finished, the lawyer tapped the table with her pen thoughtfully and said, "Well, it's a difficult situation, but not hopeless. The main thing now is to gather all the possible information and develop a competent defense strategy. We need to figure out Ethan's real motives, find possible errors in his arguments, and be prepared for any turn of events." Amber looked at her friend with renewed hope. Olivia's familiar enthusiasm and determination had always inspired her during their student debates. She knew that she could not find a better lawyer. Olivia was a true professional, a fearless fighter, and relentless for justice. "Where do we start?" asked Amber, full of energy and ready to act. Olivia smiled, a smile of unwavering confidence. "First, we will gather all the documents related to the purchase of the house, the deed, bank statements, ownership papers. Then I'll do my own investigation to see if there's anything in Ethan's past or present that we can use in court." Amber nodded, mentally making a list of the necessary paperwork. She could feel the heaviness in her heart slowly being replaced by determination and hope. With Olivia by her side, she was ready to fight for her rights until the end. "Amber," said the lawyer softly, placing her hand on her friend's arm, "remember that you're not alone in this battle. I'll be with you until the end. And I'll do everything I can to make sure you keep what is rightfully yours." Olivia's words warmed Amber's soul, giving her strength and confidence. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she firmly believed that justice would prevail and that she would defend her home and her right to a happy life. Thanking her friend and saying goodbye, Amber left the office, determined to fight. She had a battle ahead, but she knew she was ready for any challenge. After all, there was too much at stake: her dreams, her future, her faith in herself and in the justice of the world. With these thoughts in mind, Amber headed home, facing the familiar, but with the firm conviction that the truth and the law would be on her side, which meant that she would surely win. Ethan Donovan was sitting in his luxurious office on the top floor of the business center, where he had an impressive view of the city's business district. However, now his thoughts were far from the impressive panorama outside the window. All his attention was focused on the phone conversation. "Listen, James. I need your help," Ethan said, leaning back in his leather armchair. His ambition and ruthlessness had always been his distinguishing features. Since childhood, he had aspired to success at any cost. Elite closed schools, prestigious universities, membership in exclusive clubs, and the willingness to go to any extreme to achieve his goals were hallmarks of his life. "I'm all ears." James's voice sounded interested. "What are you up to, Ethan?" Ethan smiled like a predator anticipating victory. He knew he could use his contacts to get Amber into a real mess and force her to make concessions. "First, we need to pressure her bosses," he began to outline his plan. "You know people in the management of the marketing agency where she works, right? Tell them that Amber is not doing her job well, that her personal problems interfere with her work. Make them start expressing their dissatisfaction. Increase the supervision. Create an uncomfortable atmosphere. Consider it done." James replied smugly. "I not only have friends there, I have someone who owes me a favor. Your wife will cry under the pressure at work." "Great." Ethan felt satisfied. "The next step is to freeze our joint accounts and our credit cards." "What does that mean?" James asked, curious about his friend's plan. "It means that Amber will lose all means of livelihood. She'll need money to pay her lawyer, her bills, and to live. If she doesn't have cash and the stress is unbearable, she'll be much more willing to give in and agree to whatever I propose." James chuckled approvingly. "You are truly brilliant, Ethan. I think you are underestimating your abilities to create a true work of art from the destruction of your marriage." "But that's not all," Ethan continued, not wanting to slow down. "I have other plans for my darling ex-wife. I will find out who her closest friends are, and I will try to alienate them from her. I want her to feel completely alone and helpless. We also need to create some public scandals so that she won't be able to escape the gossip. If she needs money, her friend and lawyer, Olivia, could be a problem. So the best way is to get rid of this obstacle by destroying her reputation. And this is the most interesting part," exclaimed James with anticipation. "My friend, you really know how to get your way. I am looking forward to the show." Ethan smiled slyly. He knew that his plan was perfect and that Amber would have no chance of winning. He was confident in his victory. And nothing and no one could stop him. Amber will feel trapped financially. And she'll realize she depends on me. Then she'll cooperate more," Ethan declared confidently. James chuckled on the phone. "Ethan, my friend, you are wickedly twisted. The poor girl doesn't know who she's messing with. Consider it all done in the best way." "Thanks, James. I knew I could count on you," Ethan said with feeling. "And as if that wasn't enough, I have a few more tricks up my sleeve. For example, the dirty laundry of her precious lawyer girlfriend. I'll find a way to make Olivia Johnson stop sticking her nose into my and Amber's business." "I'm sure you will, old friend," James said with approval. "You always get your way. And this time will be no different. Keep me updated if you need any more help." Thanking his friend, Ethan ended the call and leaned back in his chair, gazing dreamily out the window. He imagined how Amber, under the pressure of problems, would collapse and accept his conditions. He would ensure that in the divorce, he would keep most of the assets they had acquired together, including that cursed house. Silly Amber, Ethan thought with a contemptuous chuckle. Did you really think you could compete with me? I'll crush you like a bug. And you'll beg for mercy. Ethan picked up the glass of whiskey that was on the table in anticipation of his imminent victory. Taking a generous sip of the fiery drink, he mentally considered other ways to pressure his recalcitrant wife. After all, any means were acceptable in this war. Meanwhile, Amber, oblivious to her husband's insidious plans, was facing the first warning signs of the impending storm. First, there were the persistent questions from her boss about the delivery deadline for a project she was managing. Her once loyal and friendly manager suddenly became picky and irritated, as if looking for the slightest reason to pick on her. Then came the barely veiled insinuations from her colleagues that Amber was being distracted too often by personal matters to the detriment of her work. The friendly atmosphere that had previously prevailed in the office was replaced by tension and underlying hostility. Amber wondered what could have caused such a sudden change. The last straw was a visit to the bank where she was informed that her credit card had been blocked and her account had been frozen. The employee's convoluted explanations about technical problems did not convince her. Amber left the bank with a heavy heart and a growing sense of anxiety. When she returned home, she sank, exhausted, onto the sofa. Unwanted tears streamed down her cheeks, washing away what remained of her already fragile confidence. Was Ethan really so powerful that he could destroy her life with a snap of his fingers? Would she be able to stand up to him and assert her rights? Doubts crept into Amber's soul like poisonous snakes, paralyzing her will and robbing her of the determination to fight. Perhaps she should have resigned herself to Ethan's conditions to maintain some peace. But deep down she held on to the hope that justice would prevail. After all, she had the truth and the law on her side. Gathering her courage, Amber picked up the phone. She needed to hear Olivia's voice, her firm assurance, and her friendly support. Only together could they unmask Ethan's intrigues and put an end to his dishonorable game. Anxious and hopeful, Amber dialed a familiar number. She knew the battle would be difficult, but she had no doubt that she would find the strength to face the challenge to the end and defend her rights, her dignity, and her right to happiness. Olivia Johnson was sitting at her desk, immersed in the study of the documents and files she had managed to obtain in recent days. The lawyer's face was extremely concentrated, with furrowed brows and pursed lips. She knew that somewhere in those papers hid a clue to Ethan Donovan's real motives. Suddenly, a seemingly insignificant detail caught her attention, but, if examined carefully, could shed light on the situation. It was a bank statement belonging to a company Ethan co-owned. Several large transfers made in recent months had seemed suspicious to Olivia. Her intuition, honed after years of work in the legal field, suggested that these transactions might be related to illegal activity. Without thinking twice, Olivia investigated further, requesting additional information and using her police contacts. After a few hours of painstaking work, the picture began to clear. It turned out that Ethan's company was involved in money laundering and tax evasion schemes. Furthermore, Ethan himself played a key role, using his knowledge and connections to carry out dubious operations. Olivia experienced mixed feelings. On the one hand, she felt satisfaction for the confirmation of her suspicions. And on the other, she felt anguish for her friend who was about to learn the terrible truth about her husband. But the lawyer understood that it was not a time for sentimentality. She had to act decisively and use the information to protect Amber's interests. Olivia dialed her friend's number and waited impatiently for an answer. When she heard Amber's tired voice, the lawyer said without further ado, "You won't believe what I've managed to find out about Ethan. We need to meet right now. I think I have information that could help us win the case." When Olivia detected a note of uncertainty and fear in her friend's voice, she hurried to reassure her. "Look, I know this isn't easy for you right now. But believe me, we can get through this together. The main thing is that you keep your spirits up and believe in our victory." See you in my office in an hour. Okay? Upon receiving an affirmative response, Olivia ended the call and began to prepare for the next meeting. She was aware that the news of Ethan's criminal affairs would surprise and frighten Amber. But she firmly believed that this information would be her foundation in the upcoming legal battle. Exactly 1 hour later, Amber entered Olivia's office. Her face showed signs of fatigue and anxiety, but her eyes were determined to fight to the end. Olivia motioned for her friend to sit down. And without further ado, she presented her findings. As Olivia spoke, Amber's face became paler and paler. Shock, disbelief, and anger emotions alternated, reflected in her wide-open eyes. When the lawyer finished her story, Amber remained silent for a while, trying to understand what she had heard. I can't believe it, she finally said in a trembling voice. How could he do this? Get involved in crime and try to take my house? It's too much. Olivia put her hand on her friend's in a gesture of support. She could see that Amber was agitated and confused. But she knew it was important that she remain calm and collected. Amber. Understand. This is not a time for emotions, the lawyer said in a low but insistent voice. Yes. The truth about Ethan is shocking. But we have to use this information to protect your rights. With this evidence of his wrongdoings, we can not only protect your interests in the division of assets but also get just retribution for him. Amber looked at her friend with determination. She was surprised and frightened. But Olivia's words had instilled confidence in her. It was not a time to hesitate or back down, it was a time to fight for her dream. For her right to happiness and justice. You're right, Olivia, Amber said firmly. It's over with hiding and waiting for a miracle. It's time to take action and bring Ethan to light. Tell me what we have to do now. Olivia nodded approvingly, proud of her friend's strength and courage. Together, they began to develop an action plan that would not only protect Amber's rights but also expose Ethan's criminal machinations. The women realized that the battle would be difficult and long. But now, armed with irrefutable evidence and the belief in justice, they were ready to go all the way. And although Ethan Donovan tried to use all his contacts and resources, the truth and the law would still prevail. With renewed hope and determination, Amber left her friend's office. She knew that a difficult road lay ahead. But she knew she had her loyal Olivia and her unwavering will to win. This meant that she would stand firm and get what she wanted, whatever the cost. Amber stood in front of the door to Ethan's office, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Her mind was buzzing with thoughts of the betrayal, lies, and duplicity that seemed to be part of the nature of the man who would soon be her ex-husband. Her heart was beating as if it were about to burst out of her chest. But Amber knew it was not a time for weakness. She had to get answers to her questions and put an end to this farce once and for all. With determination, she opened the door and entered the spacious office. Ethan was sitting at the huge mahogany desk, engrossed in the study of some papers. He flinched when he saw his wife and slowly raised his head, meeting her gaze. What are you doing here, Amber? He asked coldly, putting the papers aside. As far as I know, my lawyer was supposed to contact yours to discuss the details of the divorce. Amber smiled, wondering how she could have overlooked that cynicism and calculation in the eyes of the man she had once loved. I haven't come here to talk about the divorce, she said. Ethan gritted his teeth. I want to know the truth. The whole truth. About your dirty actions and machinations. And believe me, I have information that will make you talk. Alarm flickered in Ethan's eyes for a moment. But he quickly recovered, leaning back in his chair and giving Amber a condescending look. I have no idea what you're talking about, dear. But even if I did, why would I have to answer to you? Our marriage is a farce. And we both know it. So let's not put on a melodramatic scene and calmly resolve the division of assets. Amber felt anger boiling inside her. How dare he act as if she was an annoying litigant and not the woman with whom he had lived for 8 years? Sharing his joys and sorrows? Taking a deep breath, she approached the table and, looking directly into Ethan's eyes, said, "So, money laundering and tax evasion are melodrama for you? Or perhaps using your official position to commit real estate fraud is nothing either? Believe me, Ethan, I have proof of all your crimes. And if you don't stop your dirty games and give up claiming my house, that evidence will be on the police's desk." Ethan's face turned white. It was clear that he did not expect Amber to know so much. For a moment, the mask of equanimity cracked, revealing fear and confusion. But he quickly jumped up from the table and walked around it, approaching his wife. "Listen, Amber," he said in the ingratiating tone that had once seemed so charming. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Yes, I may have made some mistakes in my way of doing business. But believe me, everything can be fixed. There's no need to resort to the police or the courts. After all, we're civilized people." With these words, he tried to put his arm around Amber's shoulders. But she pulled away angrily. His touch, which until recently had been warm and gentle, now only disgusted her. "Don't you dare touch me," she cried, unable to hold back the tears. "Your mistakes are crimes, Ethan. And I won't let you get away with it. You will answer for everything, for your machinations and for the lies you've told me all these years." Ethan looked at his wife for a long time, with something terrifying cold, calculating, and inflexible determination. "Well, darling," he said, his voice dripping with poison, "if you decide to declare war on me, don't complain about the consequences. I have enough contacts and opportunities to turn your life into hell. So think carefully before threatening me with the police. You've lost this game in advance." With those words, Ethan returned to the table, making it clear that the conversation was over. Amber stood there, surprised and confused, feeling the ground slip from beneath her feet. How could she have been so wrong about the man to whom she had united her life? Would she have the strength to face his threats and assert her rights? Amber staggered out of the office, unable to bear Ethan's presence any longer. Fear and despair were suffocating her, threatening to swallow her whole. For the first time in years, she felt completely alone and helpless. But somewhere in her mind, there was still a spark of hope. She had Olivia, her loyal friend and brilliant lawyer. Together, they could find a way out of this seemingly desperate situation. All she had to do was recover and keep fighting. With the phone in hand, Amber dialed Olivia's number. Now, more than ever, she needed support and advice. Even if the world was against her, she would not give up without a fight. Her dignity, her future, and her right to justice were at stake. Amber burst into Olivia's office, barely holding back the tears. Her friend immediately got up from her desk and hugged her tightly, silently offering her support and comfort. They remained like this for a few minutes, and Amber could feel the tension gradually releasing and her thoughts clearing. Finally, Olivia gently pulled away, looked Amber in the eyes, and said, "Tell me what happened. Tell me what happened. Because from the expression on your face, the meeting with Ethan didn't go well." Amber sighed, sank into the visitor's chair, and told her friend about the conversation she had had with her husband, his threats, and the fear and despair she had felt when she realized how serious he could be as an adversary. Olivia listened in silence, nodding from time to time and taking notes in her notebook. When Amber finished her story, the lawyer remained pensive for a moment and then said, "Well, at least now we know what we're up against. It's clear that Ethan is terrified of the possibility that his dirty secrets will come to light and is willing to do anything to avoid it. But we have a few tricks up our sleeve. And we need to do the right thing with them. Amber looked at her friend. Confused. What was she talking about? Ethan had made it clear that he had enough power and contacts to make her life impossible. As if she had read her thoughts. Olivia smiled and leaned forward, speaking in a conspiratorial tone. I have a plan. Amber. It's unexpected and risky. But it could work. We'll not only protect your interests in the divorce but also expose Ethan's machinations. We'll make him answer for all the crimes he has committed. Amber felt her heart race. There was more to come. She had a chance to emerge victorious from this battle. What do you suggest? Olivia, she asked breathlessly. I'd do anything to end this nightmare. The lawyer leaned back in her chair, put her hands together, and began to outline her plan. First of all, we need to gather irrefutable evidence of Ethan's illegal activities. These can be documents, phone records, witness statements. The more evidence we gather, the stronger our position will be. Amber nodded, feeling hope stirring in her soul. Yes. Gathering evidence was a real opportunity to expose Ethan and protect her rights. But that's not all. Olivia continued with a spark of excitement in her eyes. At the same time, we're going to look for his skeletons in the closet. Every successful man has his secrets and weaknesses. You just have to know where to look. What do you mean? Amber frowned, not quite sure what her friend meant. I mean, we'll find what Ethan fears most. Olivia smiled. It could be dirty laundry from the past or information that could ruin his reputation in business circles. Believe me, everyone has leverage. And we'll find it on your husband. Amber felt a chill. What Olivia was proposing was similar to blackmail and extortion. But did she have a choice? Ethan had started this dirty game first. And she couldn't let him get away with it. Taking a deep breath, Amber said firmly, I agree. Olivia, let's move forward with your plan. I trust you. And I believe that together we can achieve justice. The lawyer nodded in approval and, getting up from her desk, began to pace the office, outlining the details of the next steps. I'll start by involving my informants and private investigators to investigate Ethan's past and present, to find clues and evidence. You, for your part, try to remember anything that might be useful to us: conversations, encounters, suspicious details that you haven't paid attention to before. Amber nodded, feeling her determination strengthen. Yes. It was a long and thorny path. But she was willing to go all the way for herself. For her future. For the truth. One more thing. Amber. Olivia paused, looking her friend in the eyes, and then said with pressure, while we continue with this investigation, you have to act as if nothing has happened. Let Ethan think that his threats have worked. That you're broken and scared. That way, he'll lower his guard and give us the opportunity to attack at the most unexpected moment. Amber swallowed the lump in her throat. It was not in her nature to pretend. But now too much was at stake. And she was willing to learn to act if it helped her win against Ethan. I can do it. Olivia, she said firmly, feeling her doubts and fears recede before her unwavering determination. You can count on me. They embraced, sealing their silent pact. They knew that the path to the truth would be long and difficult. That they would face tough trials and bitter discoveries. But together, they would overcome everything. After all, on their side were love, friendship, and an unwavering faith in justice. And that meant that victory would be theirs. With that in mind, Amber and Olivia launched their bold plan. They began to methodically gather evidence, interview witnesses, and study documents. In short, they were unraveling the tangle of lies and crimes that Ethan Donovan's life had become. And although the results of their work were not too impressive, the main thing was that the machinery of justice was in motion. And no one could stop it now. Amber was sitting in the spacious courtroom, nervously rubbing her handkerchief between her hands. Olivia sat beside her, radiating confidence and calm. Her friend squeezed Amber's hand encouragingly, letting her know silently that she was not alone in this battle. In front of her, at the long defense table, Ethan was sitting with his lawyer. A tall man with a predatory profile and a sharp gaze. He seemed to radiate an aura of authority and unwavering self-confidence. The judge, a middle-aged woman with an imposing demeanor, took the stand and struck the gavel to declare the trial open. Amber felt a chill. It was the moment of truth, when her fate would be decided. Ethan's lawyer was the first to speak. Slowly rising from the table, he scanned the room with a heavy gaze and began his speech. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Donovan, has been the victim of horrendous slander and manipulation by his wife, Mrs. Fitzpatrick. Driven by greed and revenge, she is trying to defame his good name and seize jointly acquired assets. Amber gasped in indignation. How dare he portray her as a greedy schemer when she was the opposite? But the lawyer, as if oblivious to her outrage, continued his denunciation. For half an hour, he argued in favor of his client, skillfully manipulating the facts and turning the truth on its head. Amber felt like she was in a nightmare where everything was upside down. Look at this woman. Your Honor, the lawyer pointed at Amber with a finger trembling with righteous anger. Would you believe that this fragile angel is capable of such monstrous fraud and deceit? All her accusations are nothing more than the subtle revenge of a scorned wife who would do anything to destroy her husband. Amber felt like she was suffocating. Tears of resentment and helplessness welled up in her throat, threatening to spill over. She looked helplessly at Olivia for support and understanding. Her friend, intercepting her gaze, nodded slightly and, standing up, said in a firm voice, I protest. Your Honor, the defense is using inadmissible methods of pressure on my client and blatant lies. I demand that these dirty insinuations cease and that they return to the facts of the case. The judge, frowning, struck her gavel, calling for order. I protest. Counselor, stick to the facts and to the testimony, she said sharply. Your Honor, I only wanted to show how terrible my client's suffering was, caused by his unfaithful wife. Her malice and cunning know no bounds. But you are absolutely right. We must stick to the facts. And the facts are these, and he began to list the arguments in favor of Ethan, skillfully juggling documents and testimonies. He persuaded, exhorted, played with emotions, all to make Amber look like a liar and a manipulator. At the end of his speech, the poor woman felt completely crushed and destroyed. It seemed as if she was starting to believe in her own guilt and worthlessness. But then Olivia took the floor, calmly and confidently, without a shadow of fear or doubt. She began to refute the defense's arguments one by one. Her voice sounded firm and convincing as she presented the court with irrefutable evidence of Ethan's lies and machinations. Your Honor, as you can see, Mr. Donovan's accusations against my client are nothing more than a smokescreen to divert attention from his own crimes. Olivia concluded. The truth is, he is guilty of forgery, fraud, and blatant hypocrisy. And I will prove it. A murmur of voices echoed in the room. The judge called for order. But it was evident that she was impressed by Olivia's words. Ethan's lawyer jumped up, trying to protest. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been sown. That's enough for today, the judge announced, striking her gavel. The hearing is adjourned until next week. The parties must prepare more evidence and witnesses. Amber left the room exhausted and drained. Yes, Olivia had been able to fend off the dirty tricks of Ethan's lawyer. But how long would she be able to maintain the pressure? As if reading her thoughts, her friend put her arm around Amber's shoulders and whispered, Don't worry, darling. It's just the first round. From now on, it'll be easier. The important thing is that we've taken the initiative and sown the doubt. Now we need to gather more evidence and testimonies against Ethan. And believe me, we will. We'll get to the bottom of this. Amber nodded gratefully, feeling the flame of hope reigniting in her soul. There was still a long way to go. But she believed that with Olivia, they could go all the way and achieve justice, whatever the cost. A few days later, the courtroom was buzzing with tension as Olivia Johnson prepared to present her key evidence. Amber was sitting next to her, holding her breath, desperately hoping that this little piece of paper would turn the tide of the trial in her favor. Finally, Olivia stood up and, holding a plastic bag in her hand, strode confidently towards the judge. "Your Honor," she began in a sonorous voice, "I have evidence that leaves no room for doubt about Mr. Donovan's guilt. It is a statement from a secret overseas account to which he transferred the proceeds of his crime." A murmur of surprise ran through the room. The judge frowned and made a gesture for order. "The defense wants to see this document," Ethan's lawyer said, barely containing his irritation. Olivia handed him a copy of the transcript and, after waiting for him to scan it, continued. "As you can see, Your Honor, here in black and white are the dates and amounts of the illegal transfers. And the signature at the bottom belongs to none other than Mr. Donovan." Ethan jumped up from his seat, his face flushed with anger. "It's a forgery," he shouted, pointing his finger at Amber. "My wife has made up that statement to defame me. She's obsessed with the idea of taking away my business and my reputation." Amber let out a cry of indignation. Her own husband was accusing her of paranoia and lying to justice. Olivia, on the other hand, remained calm. "Your Honor," she said to the judge, "this statement has been legally obtained from a reliable source. We are prepared to provide proof of its authenticity. And as for Mr. Donovan's accusations against my client, well, in light of the evidence of his own impropriety, they are at least unconvincing." Ethan's lawyer jumped up, stammering, "I protest. Your Honor. The defense is trying to defame my client with speculation and fabrications. I demand that these dubious pieces of evidence be excluded from the record." The judge rubbed the bridge of her nose wearily and, casting a stern look at the parties in the litigation, said, "The court accepts the document for consideration. However, Miss Johnson will have to provide more solid evidence of its authenticity. A mere transcript is not enough to formulate such a serious accusation." Amber's heart sank. She had played her trump card of truth, and it had been challenged. Would Ethan get away with it this time as well? But Olivia didn't seem defeated. With a decisive nod, she said, "Your Honor, we have a witness who can corroborate all the facts. A man who personally participated in Mr. Donovan's illegal operations. I request that Mr. James Widmore be called to the stand." A murmur of surprise ran through the room. Ethan turned pale and clenched his teeth. And his lawyer jumped up, scattering papers around him. But it was too late. Olivia had dealt her blow. "Call the prosecution's witness." "James Widmore," barked the bailiff. And the doors of the room swung open. A middle-aged man with the tired face of a man who has seen a lot walked in. Amber held her breath. Would he really be able to testify against Ethan? Would she finally receive her deserved justice? Olivia gave her friend a reassuring smile. Her eyes shone with an unwavering determination to go to the end. And Amber believed that they would achieve it. The truth would be restored. And justice would be done. James Widmore confidently took the stand, ignoring the hateful glares of Ethan and his lawyer. Olivia approached him, radiating serene confidence. "Mr. Widmore," she began, "please tell the court about your relationship with Mr. Donovan and what you know about his affairs." James coughed and, glancing quickly at Ethan, began his story. I worked with Ethan for many years. We were business partners. But more than that. We were friends, at least that's what I thought, until I discovered what he was capable of for money and power. A surprised murmur ran through the room. Ethan clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles turned white. But he remained silent. Ethan has always been ambitious and resourceful. James continued. But I never imagined he would cross the legal line. First, it was a small tax fraud. Then forgery of documents. Bribes to officials. And then he involved me in a scheme to launder money overseas. Ethan's lawyer jumped up, stammering. I protest. A witness is testifying to defame my client without any evidence, he said. But Olivia was ready for that outburst. Your Honor. We have evidence, documents. Records. Correspondence that corroborates every word Mr. Widmore has said. If the court allows, I am prepared to present that material. The judge nodded and gestured for Olivia to continue. James went on and on, revealing more and more of Ethan's dirty secrets. The audience listened with bated breath. Amber couldn't believe what she was hearing. The man she believed to be her beloved husband had turned out to be a fraud and a criminal. How could she have been so blind? Her hands were shaking, and nausea was rising in her throat. Suddenly, James was talking about her. Amber stirred, fearing to miss a word. When Ethan divorced Amber, the witness said, he told me that she was a burden on his success. That he wanted to get rid of her and keep everything she had worked so hard to earn. He even offered to hire people to tarnish her reputation and make her look like a crazy person. A roar of indignation was heard in the room. The judge called for order. Ethan squirmed in his chair, avoiding looking at his wife. Amber's eyes dimmed. Her own husband was willing to destroy her. And for what? Money. Power. Vanity. How could she have loved a monster like that? Olivia finished her questioning and returned to her seat with a satisfied smile on her face. She knew that James's testimony would be a decisive blow to Ethan's position. The defendant's lawyer had tried to discredit the witness, accusing him of lying for revenge. But it was too late. The seed of truth had been sown. After a recess, the judge retired to the jury room. And Olivia approached Amber and hugged her tightly. You're doing great, she whispered. I know how difficult it must be for you to hear this. But the truth has finally come to light. Now, Ethan will get what he deserves. Amber swallowed her tears. Yes. The truth was bitter. But better a bitter truth than a sweet lie. Suddenly, James Widmore approached them. Amber tensed up. But the man simply smiled guiltily. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, I wanted to apologize to you for knowing what Ethan was planning and keeping silent. For not stopping him when he decided to ruin your life. I beg your forgiveness. After hesitating, Amber finally nodded. James had ultimately helped to bring about justice. And his belated remorse seemed genuine. Thank you for finding the strength to tell the truth, she said. It means a lot to me. Ethan's former colleague apologized again and left, wishing Amber good luck. Olivia squeezed her friend's shoulder to reassure her. You see, not everyone in the business world is a scoundrel. There are always people willing to defend the truth. Amber nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope in her soul. James's testimony was a breath of fresh air. A reminder that she was not alone in her fight. That even if Ethan and his lawyers conspired, even if the whole world turned against her, Amber had loyal friends and her own determination to fight to the end. And she would fight for her rights. For her good name. For her dream. The silence in the room resounded with tension as the members of the jury, one by one, left their seats and disappeared behind the heavy door of the deliberation room. Amber held her breath and felt her heart race. Right now. At that very moment. 12 strangers were deciding her fate. There had been long and grueling weeks of hearings. presentation of evidence, and questioning of witnesses. The dirty laundry of the Donovan family had been turned inside out and publicly exposed. It seemed as if Amber's very soul had been dissected and laid bare in that room. But now it was all behind them. The prosecution and the defense had played their cards. And the end of this drama depended only on the jury's decision. Suddenly, Amber felt like she was suffocating. Her tie was tightening around her throat. And she couldn't breathe. Her hands were trembling. And her mouth was dry. How could she expect those people, complete strangers to her, to understand her and take her side? What if Ethan had managed to deceive them with his false charm and his feigned remorse? Fear and doubt seized Amber. She squirmed in her seat and felt her eyes fill with tears of helplessness. Even her unwavering faith in her own righteousness seemed to be crumbling before the unknown. But then, a warm hand rested on Amber's shoulder. Olivia, her loyal friend and brilliant lawyer, was looking at her with a reassuring smile. "Don't be afraid, darling," she whispered, leaning closer to Amber's ear. "We've done everything we could. The jury has seen the evidence. They've heard the witnesses. They can't help but realize who the real victim is and who the cold-blooded manipulator is." Amber sighed convulsively and squeezed Olivia's hand between hers. She was so grateful for her friend's unconditional support, for her unwavering faith in her innocence. "Thank you," Amber murmured through tears. "If it weren't for you, I would never have decided to fight this battle. You gave me the strength to believe in myself and fight to the end." Olivia shook her head and squeezed Amber's fingers more tightly. "You're stronger than you think, darling. You just needed someone to remind you of that. And believe me, whatever the jury decides, you've already won. You've conquered your fears, your pain, your addiction to that bastard. You've shown everyone, and yourself, that you deserve something better." Olivia's words were a comforting balm to Amber's tortured soul. She took a breath and straightened her back, squaring her shoulders. Her friend was right. Whatever happened, Amber had already achieved a great victory over herself, over her demons, over everything that had kept her captive for so many years. Amber looked across the aisle where Ethan was sitting, her almost ex-husband. He looked unusually pale and nervous. From time to time, he would tug at his tie and cast worried glances at the door of the conference room. His usual self-confidence seemed to have crumbled. And yes, for the first time in his life, he felt like his luck was running out. But Amber no longer felt pity or sympathy for him. He had caused her too much pain and sorrow. He had kept her afraid and submissive for too long. Now, whatever the jury decided, their paths would separate forever. And she, Amber, could start a new, free life, full of hope and opportunities. As if in response to her thoughts, the door to the deliberation room opened, and the members of the jury took their seats. Amber's heart skipped a beat. The moment of truth had arrived. Without taking her eyes off the 12 men and women on whom her fate depended, Amber surprised herself by thinking that she was no longer afraid. Whatever happened, she was ready to accept their judgment with her head held high. After all, now Amber knew her own worth and the value of her freedom. And she wasn't going to allow anyone to take away her right to happiness again. With that thought, she squeezed Olivia's hand and held her breath as she prepared to hear the verdict that would change her life forever. The tension in the room reached its peak as the foreman of the court stood up from his seat with the verdict sheet in his hands. Amber held her breath and felt her heart race. Olivia was by her side, holding her friend's fingers. "All rise. Session is now open," announced the bailiff. And everyone rose from their seats. The judge, a majestic middle-aged woman, took her chair and with a nod of her head invited the foreman to announce the sentence. "Your Honor," the man began, his voice sounding unusually loud in the frozen silence of the room. After considering all the evidence and listening to the testimonies, we, the jury, unanimously declare Mrs. Amber Fitzpatrick innocent of all charges. In addition, we declare Mr. Ethan Donovan guilty of fraud, forgery, and breach of trust. Amber's legs gave way, and she was about to collapse onto the bench. Olivia put her arm around her shoulders, unable to hide her tears of joy. "We did it. Darling," she whispered through sobs. "You won. You won in every way." Amber couldn't believe what she was hearing. The nightmare of the last few months was finally over. Justice had really been done. With a gesture of satisfaction, the judge struck the gavel, confirming the verdict. "Mrs. Fitzpatrick, I congratulate you on your victory. The entire property, including the house, remains in your possession. Mr. Donovan will have to answer to the law for his actions." Ethan, white as a sheet, jumped up from his seat. But the bailiff immediately put his hand on his shoulder, forcing him to sit down again. His face expressed a mixture of disbelief, fear, and rage. And Amber? Amber felt like an enormous weight had been lifted from her. She took a deep breath, feeling life and energy return to her body. Justice had been done. She had recovered her home, her dignity, her faith in herself. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She turned to Olivia and hugged her friend tightly. "Thank you. Thank you for everything," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never would have made it without you. You're not just the best lawyer, but the best friend anyone could ask for." Olivia returned the hug and caressed Amber's hair affectionately. "Darling, all of this is your doing. Your strength. Your determination. I just showed you the way. But you walked it alone with courage and your head held high. And I couldn't be prouder of you." When the women finally separated, Amber took a look at the silent room. Not long ago, this place had seemed like a battlefield where she would be defeated. Now, it was her triumph. The moment when she had regained control of her life. In a corner, surrounded by officers, was Ethan. Once omnipotent and imposing, now defeated and pathetic. Their eyes met for a split second, and Amber shuddered to see the raw hatred in his eyes. But she immediately looked away. She no longer had anything to fear from him. He had lost all power over her. Olivia took her hand and pulled her towards the exit. It was time to leave that place and face a new reality. A reality in which Amber was once again the master of her own destiny. "Come on. We have to celebrate," Olivia exclaimed cheerfully, pulling her friend towards the door. "I have a bottle of champagne in the fridge waiting to be opened. And then we'll get to work on your beautiful house, the house of your dreams, where you'll start a new chapter in your life." Amber smiled through her tears. Yes. Something new was beginning now. She was leaving behind a past full of pain and humiliation to step confidently into the future. Holding Olivia's hand, she crossed the threshold of the room and stepped into a sunny day that seemed to shine brighter than usual. Amber greedily inhaled the fresh air, savoring the taste of freedom. There was a home and a new life waiting for her. And she was ready to face them with optimism and hope. After all, she deserved a happy ending. And she was about to make it a reality. 6 months after the fateful trial, the lives of the heroes of this story have changed radically. Like a strange kaleidoscope that, when turned, reveals a new and beautiful pattern. Amber Fitzpatrick, who won a hard-fought battle to get the house of her dreams, threw herself headfirst into its arrangement. Every room, every corner of this spacious mansion was filled with warmth and comfort, becoming a reflection of her kind and loving soul. Free from the oppression of her toxic relationship with her ex-husband, Amber blossomed like a beautiful flower seeking the sun. Her emerald eyes sparkled with true happiness, and her melodious laughter echoing through the halls and corridors of the house. Was like waking it from a long and dark sleep. Divorcing Ethan, although it had left deep scars on Amber's heart, had been for her a ritual of purification and liberation. Now, breathing the sweet air of freedom, she savored every moment of her new life. Like a butterfly escaping a tight cocoon, Amber immersed herself in her work with renewed zeal. And her undoubted talent and tenacity quickly earned her the recognition she deserved from her colleagues and superiors. Amber had already become accustomed to her new status as a free woman and owner of the beautiful house she had worked so hard for. Her work brought her pleasure and professional satisfaction. What more could she ask for? But sometimes, in moments of pensive solitude, Amber felt that something was missing in her life. Or rather, someone who could share her joys and sorrows. Someone she could trust without fear of betrayal. After experiencing the pain and disappointment of a failed marriage, she was wary of opening her heart again. The memories of her ex-husband's deceit and lies were too fresh. Should she risk her fragile happiness by letting someone get too close to her? But life had its own way. One day, while taking her nephew to football practice, Amber accidentally bumped into a tall man with kind eyes the color of a summer sky. It turned out that he was the father of one of the young athletes and a frequent guest at the children's games. His name was Adam. He was an architect, an amateur painter, and loved to spend time with his son. At first, Amber and he had only exchanged polite greetings and platitudes. But little by little, those brief conversations had become deeper and more personal. Amber was surprised by the ease with which she could communicate with Adam. His gentle smile and warm gaze seemed to penetrate her soul, making her forget her fears and doubts. She felt calm and confident by his side, as if protected by a safe shoulder. Their friendship grew stronger day by day, walks together in the park, long telephone conversations about anything and everything, moving gestures of attention towards Amber. All of this was slowly awakening in her heart a feeling she had been afraid to even dream about. True and sincere love was willing to knock on her door again. But the ghosts of the past were not willing to let Amber go. No matter how much she convinced herself of Adam's decency, the slightest excuse would unleash a storm of doubts and fears in her soul. What if he, too, turned out to be a skillful liar and manipulator? Could he be a cruel and calculating egomaniac behind a mask of kindness? Amber hesitated, afraid to take a step towards her happiness. But Adam, as if sensing her anguish, continued to demonstrate his sincerity and reliability day after day. His care and commitment slowly healed the wounds of the past and allowed Amber to believe in love again. And on a quiet autumn evening, when they were sitting on her porch admiring the purple sunset and sharing their deepest dreams, Amber realized that the time had come to leave her fears behind. It was time to give herself an opportunity to achieve the happiness that had been denied her for so long. Looking into Adam's clear eyes, full of tenderness and promise, Amber leaned in to kiss him. And in that instant, the wall of distrust crumbled, revealing the birth of a new love, mature, wise, and ready to face any challenge. Now, Amber knew that her home had finally found its true owner, a man she could entrust her heart to. And although many challenges awaited them, together they would overcome any obstacle on the path to their common happiness. With this faith and this love in her heart, Amber greeted each new day, knowing that her dreams had finally found their wings. And within the cozy walls of her dream home, there would never again be room for lies, pain, and disappointment, only for boundless tenderness, sincerity, and the harmony of two hearts in love. Meanwhile, Ethan Donovan, convicted on all counts, ended up in a not-so-remote place where he would spend many years reflecting on the mistakes and atrocities he had committed. Having lost everything he had: reputation, money, connections, he stood on the ruins of his once brilliant life, realizing bitterly that he had created his own downfall. He had a thorny path of redemption and redefinition ahead of him. And only time could tell if he would be able to take the path of correction. Olivia Johnson, brilliant lawyer and invaluable friend, continued to fight in the courts with undying fervor. Amber's resounding victory in the trial earned her well-deserved recognition in the legal world and a series of promising offers. But no matter how much new professional challenges attracted her, Olivia always found time to be with Amber in her cozy house, where they shared their most intimate moments, like two siblings, over a glass of sparkling wine and intimate conversations.